Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. And we talked about what this probably, I think, meant in his life, that there were just some things he could never figure out, and this is one of them. So as noted also last week, we talked about chapter 6 and verses 11 and 12, which kind of tell of her predicament, that she, finally says, listen, I'm not here on my own accord. I was brought into this palace by the entourage of the king, who brought, who collected women along the way. I'm sure she wasn't the only one that showed up in the palace, and that she really had no desire to be there truly. And so she's in a real predicament. So the problem obviously was that by the time she arrived in the palace, she had lived as a young woman out in the hills of Ephraim. And her thoughts turned immediately back to this true love, this shepherd who she knew previously. And so she was already, really, her heart had already been reserved for another. And we understand this feeling of it's not really even a temptation when we love someone to go astray. And so the first thing that she does is remind herself that her circumstances will not change her heart. Isn't that an interesting thought? That really at the beginning, she talks and she begins to think or express that she can be anywhere and she's still thinking of the other. That the world and the evil circumstances surrounding us cannot change what's in our minds if we do not allow it to. That no matter what the world offers us, our bodies are not captive to, our bodies may be captive and living in the world, but our minds and our hearts are not captive to that world. And so while we're surrounded by the world, living in the world, we are not of the world. In other words, our hearts and our minds are living in a heavenly kingdom. And it is ours to control, our hearts and our minds. And we ended with that great passage last week in Romans that really summarizes that there's nothing that can separate us from that love that we have unless it is us and us alone. And so she begins with this text, and she begins talking about her shepherd. Let him kiss me with kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine. Because of the fragrance of your good ointments, your name is ointment poured forth. Therefore, the virgins love you. Draw me away. And then I believe the women of the palace say, well, we'll run after you. And she says, the king has brought me into his chambers. And they said, we will be glad and rejoice with you. We will remember your love more than wine. And then she says, rightly do they love you. So let's talk about these beginning verses here. She's in this palace, and we're going to see that with this king. He is pursuing her at this point. He has seen her. He believes that she thinks she's lovely. He would like to have her be one of his. And she is contemplating the fact that this is getting to be more of a situation for her, that he has at this point brought her in privately to something, whether or not it was a banqueting hall or wherever it was a more private chamber. And she begins by looking back at what she left behind. Oh, for a kiss. She longs for this shepherd, for this expression of love that she had known in the past, this most intimate of expressions, which is one reason why the betrayal of Jesus was so powerful. And when Judas comes and kisses him, and Jesus says, you betray the Son of Man with a kiss? That is a very intimate expression that one has towards another. And so we surely remember the excitement of first kisses and what she brings to mind here. It's the fondest of memories, a kiss. Our senses fill up much like they do with wine. We become warm, we become lightheaded. It is intoxicating. That is the type of love that she has for this young man. It's tremendously exciting. So she says, for thy love, she muses, is better than wine. It inflames the blood, which goes to the head, weakens the body, dissolves restraint, longing for more and more. And we understand this, that this is life. This is part of a love. And so, as we talked about last week, we are defined and our goals are driven by what we love. And I think that's why the Song of Solomon is so intensively interesting for us to study, because we have these feelings, particularly with a romantic love. We understand the drive for that. I talked last week about how, young women who say they just can't get to services on Wednesday night, or they just can't seem to get on the meal list to do something for somebody else because of their time. If it was a young man who they had just recently fallen in love with, and he asked them to, drive a couple of hours to see him for an hour, they'd do it. And so we understand this, and we must be driven by a love, a determined love, a dedicated love. So she talks about how it's better than wine, because wine sometimes can lead people astray, can't it? It can degrade, it can defile. And it can trick you, but not the kisses of true love. They never rob us, do they? And they never leave us bereft. They never leave us bereft of reason or responsibility. And we always remember those things. They are better indeed than wine. Do you not remember this? I certainly do, remember this feeling, and we tease about it, but when we see our children falling in love, they begin to not act rational about certain things, or there is just that intensive interaction. And so that is what she is describing here. And we grow accustomed then to our husbands and the ones that we feel that way about. And if we're not careful, our love, rather than maturing, which I think it does, is lost. And that's true with the Lord as well. Do you remember how excited you were when you rose out of the waters of baptism? There's a zeal, there's a freshness, there's a newness. You're going to convert everybody you just tell the good news, and surely people are going to want to know that. And then as we grow accustomed to the truths, and others don't receive the truths the way we think, we can do that with the gospel as well, where we just wane and it becomes stale, and we have to work at that. We sing about Christ's love for us, and we sing all kinds of songs. I went over some of those last week of there is a name I love to hear, and oh, how I love Jesus, and just singing his name. And we sing those songs, but they don't fill our senses if we're not careful. And we need for them to fill our senses. We need to be, in a sense, intoxicated with the truth, that it is beyond our imagination when we discover this true love. And so we need to never, ever lose that. From an early age, we sing, Jesus loves me. This I know. And we talk about this love, and this love that goes back and forth. One of my aunt's favorite songs was, Do You Know My Jesus? And do you know he cares? It's a very simple song, but that is the sentiments that are given throughout this song. And so his love is exciting. And in one of the books I read, it said we should be carving his name on every tree, which is true. That we should never lose excitement for the fact that we have Jesus Christ as our most intensive love. So anyway, one of the renderings of this line, sweet is the odor of thine ointments, is the way that because of the fragrance of your good ointment, your name is ointment poured forth, that rare is the scent of your perfume. The sound of your name is wafted like a fragrance, that hearing a name, a person coming into a room wearing a fragrance that you recognize immediately conjures up memories. She's in this palace. She's remembering the kisses that made her warm. She's remembering the smells that remind her of him. His name, even just his name, excites her and is like an odor that transcends her to a different place. The fragrance, when somebody walks in the room smelling a certain way, it sort of announces the person, doesn't it? We know who's coming in when we smell certain things. It invokes a deep emotion, which is what she's talking about here. Smell lingers after somebody's gone when, still when I go in my mom's room, it's, I smell smells that remind me. I'm sure all of you can think of your grandmothers and your grandfathers who smell a certain way. Our children used to say that white diamonds always reminded them of Russ's mother because she always wore that scent. And so that's what she's saying here, is that it's as if his, that it's, even his name conjures up this memory of the way he smelled and the way he moved. His very name conjures up a sense of his presence. Just to hear his name was joy. People could talk about, Roy and John and Paul and Tim all day long, but to her, this shepherd's name, whatever it was, David or whatever, made her heart leap. And that's the way it is when you love someone, when you first love someone. And even now there's a specialness, when people talk about Russ. So I was just up at Emory Hills and there were several Russes, and every time somebody would say Russ, I would kind of, jump, because that's my Russ. Russ is mine, but that is what the discussion is, that his name, even the name excites there, it conjures up something. And when we talk of Jesus and Christ, our Lord, the name itself, and like I said, we sing all kinds of songs that remind me of Song of Solomon, love songs and songs about his name and how joyful it is for us to know him. And so this name of the shepherd to her was like a savor of a good ointment poured forth, that it was that intensively interesting and wonderful for her. We are sanctified. We are set apart by the name of Jesus. We are set apart by our husbands' names, right? Tommy Beatty is Abby's, and that sets her apart. And Russ is mine, and Ben and Michael, and we're set apart. Our fathers set us apart. Amika belongs to a certain family, to a father, and those names mean something. And so we understand that the name of Jesus sanctifies us. It sets us apart. We are his family. The name of Jehovah was described as an ointment poured forth to Israel in Psalms 7 and 47. It shed a fragrance over all, that everybody was blessed by that beautiful fragrance that was poured forth. Colossians 3 and 17 says, "Thou shalt call his name Jesus, and he shall save his people from their sins." All we do in word and deed, do all in the name of the Lord. And so her expressions here of what a name does in her head brings her back to the shepherd, makes her remember all of those wonderful things. At the name of Jesus, every knee shall bow. That's how powerful a name is, Philippians 2. So therefore, the girls are all crazy about you, she says. Look at that next verse. She says, "And therefore the virgins love you." I mean, how could you not love him? She can't understand why everybody doesn't love him and why everybody doesn't want to know him. I mean, how glorious he is. And she's going to get more and more in detail in this song. How could you not love him? She says, "So therefore the girls are crazy about you. You have this magnetic personality. He drew others to him. He was charismatic. She indicates later, to know him is to love him. And so she talks about, draw me away. And it's as if she's speaking to him, who he's not there. I think this is a conversation between her and the women of the harem. That's who I think this is between. And she's explaining herself to these women. And so she says, he could draw others and he could deliver me. I know the power. He has the power to do that. Now, I don't know that this young man did. Later, she talks about him leaping on the mountains, and I don't know that. But obviously, in her mind, he could do anything. He was her protection, her stability, and that is what we think of Christ. And Christ can deliver us, can't he? He can draw us away from the world. He can get us out of the mess. He can take us away from the captivity of the world. And so, indeed, he can draw me away. And so it may be that she's feeling that things are getting more intense, that the king is now taking her into a different step. He's beginning to woo her in a way that she's beginning to be more anxious about. And perhaps she's feeling that she's got this feeling that she may be in peril. But there's nothing that he cannot do in her mind. He has control of this situation in her head. And I think that it is a sentiment that we have of Christ. Provide me with some relief from this situation. And so that is what we see. I don't know how this all works. I don't understand how what she really thought could happen, but love does find a way. And I don't know how she thought some country guy out in the field in Ephraim could combat a king. How somebody from the hills could confront and conquer Solomon in all of his glory. I mean, she was there in the palace with him. Or how could a shepherd subdue the armed guards around the palace? This is not a logical language. This is a language of love. It is a language that she expresses that she knows there is a way, that there is a way. And so she's sure that he can do just about anything. I think that also is probably true a lot of times with us as we're in our early stages of love, that we feel like these young men can do just about anything. We're not given the details as to how the shepherd will rescue her. She doesn't state how, just that this devoted and smitten young woman has confidence that he can do that. And so it is the way that love defies logic in the relationship we have with Christ. There's no question that immediately we are thrown into the understanding of our relationship with Christ being very much like that. The world can devise no prison that can keep a loving, trusting heart from Christ or keep him from coming to those who call his name when we ask him to draw us away. A love that defies logic. The world would tell you there is no way. How does he do that? You become a servant? Well, that's not appealing, is it? You know, how does he do that? You just get on your hands and knees and this untangible being who seems to be asleep to the world is there to take care of you. Well, that is absolutely true. So we are thrown into situations we do not understand. We are forced to rely on a faith that we cannot understand sometimes, the facts of the situations we're in. And the bottom line really is that belief and that love. And it can be a showdown in the soul between seemingly, having facts and a simple faith. And that's all it can be sometimes. I mean, this young woman, I think, is expressing her real feelings, that she wants him to come and somehow find a release for her. And we must trust our hearts at times when it comes to Christ. She's beginning that conversation, that this may not be logical to these women in the palace, but she knows the love she has for this young man. And the king cannot draw her away from that. It wasn't going to happen. And even if she stayed captive in that palace for the rest of her life, her heart and her mind belonged elsewhere. And they could not take that away from her. J.B. Phillips, in his book on Song of Solomon, interprets 1 Corinthians 13, 7 and 8. Love knows no limit to its endurance, no end to its trust, no fading to its hope. It can outlast anything. Love never fails. And so that really is what is being discussed here. Yet Solomon and these women didn't know him. They didn't know this shepherd. You ever talk to somebody in the world and you say, you just have to get to know him. Just spend some time. You don't know that he answers prayers until you pray and he answers your prayers, right? Other people can tell you that. But when we experience those things in our lives, then we can tell others about him. But they didn't know him. They'd never laid eyes on him. He was a shepherd after all. So what they had heard about him was not so impressive compared to a king. And even if they met him, They probably would not see anything of true value in him right away. We have to get to know our Lord. We have to get to know Christ. We have to understand the blessings. We have to experience this kingdom in order to understand the richness of it. People don't see that always at face value. Verse 4, this section, I believe, is the women speaking. She says, draw me away. And they say, well, we're just going to run after you, you know. And so this is, it's a key to various dramatic parts of the interpretation of this song. It's one of 5 places in the song where the word king is used. The king has brought me into his chambers. The word king is used on several occasions. It's one of the reasons why I think I come to the conclusion that this is a 3-person story, 3 main character story, that the king and the shepherd are very independently identified. And so she talks about the king here, that he has brought her now, that he is wooing her more heavily, that he is putting some pressure on her. And they say, well, that makes us happy, and we rejoice with you on that. And we will remember your love more than wine. And so they're excited for her. She states the fact that this makes her uncomfortable, and they say, this is wonderful, this is exciting. And we know from the song that the king wants to make her his wife, one of his wives, not just a concubine, but a wife. Well, that would be a position that most of these women would be thrilled to have. And so the fact that they will rejoice with her in this bidding that the king has of her is exciting for her. And so she addresses these women who seem to be intent on keeping her there and allowing her to remember how very lucky she is. They're excited for her, and so they are astonished that she is not as excited as they are about all of this. They're perhaps puzzled by the determination that she has to not be there, and she's puzzled at the determination of them to keep her there. She can't understand why that would be. And so she begins this comparison of why it makes no sense, really, for her to be where she is. They are excited for her. They will later identify all the wonderful things about the king and all the things he can offer her. And she begins here in this conversation that she has with these women by telling them why it is that she really should not be there anyway, that it makes no sense for her to be there. She talks about, let's go to these next verses here. She says, rightly do they love you. And I think she's talking to the women at the court and saying, I understand why you love the king. I understand why it is that the king is so impressive to you. And then she says, but I'm dark. Yes, I'm lovely, but I'm dark, O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon. Do not look upon me because I am dark, because the sun has tanned me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyards, but my own vineyard I have not kept. And so it's almost as if, so here she is. She's in this situation. She's in this palace. We know that. The king has brought him now into her chamber. So there's beginning to be some heat that she's being wooed by him. He has seen her now. He finds her very lovely. And I have a feeling very unlike the others in the palace. And he finds her most interesting and something to conquer. She senses that. She knows that. Her mind's still off on the shepherd that she's left behind. And she's trying to explain to these women in the harem who would have been instrumental in guidance and in getting her back and forth to the king. They would not have been women who were being considered to be concubines or queens, but would have found these young women to be lucky to do so. But she seems to suddenly become aware of the fact that she really should not be there, that she, in contrast to everything in the palace, she's quite different, that she shouldn't be in this circumstance. And don't you ever find yourself in that position in the world that you feel like I am like a fish out of water. These people must think I am the weirdest person ever. And so she begins to discuss what it is that she is. She points out first that she's dark, that she is the color of this nomadic tribe. Let's read this text and then we'll go through it. I am dark but lovely, O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon. Do not look upon me because I am dark, because the sun has tanned me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me a keeper of the vineyards, but my vineyard I have not kept. And so she talks about these tents, the tents of the Ishmaelites, Abraham's, first son. They were this dark goat's hair, dark in color. It was actually one of the layers of the tents of the tabernacle also, but they were often almost black. She seems to contrast herself with the other women in the court. Look, I shouldn't be here. I'm not like you. I understand why you find the king so appealing, but I'm nothing like you. I don't fit in this circumstance. And and so she talks about that she seems to contrast herself to them, who would have been most probably lighter skinned. If nothing else, they would have had treatments on their skin. They would have been kept indoors. She talks about herself being suntanned and the fact that she had circumstances that didn't allow her to pamper herself. That's really what she says here. She's lovely. She says, yeah, I am. I am. I'm a good one. But she is aware of the fact that her beauty was different than everybody else's, that her beauty didn't look like the beauty of the courts. And I think that's interesting as well, that her beauty was a natural beauty, which I think Christian women have. There is no question in my mind that I live in an area, and all of us here in the room do, where a lot of women have a lot of things done to make themselves look younger, and they tan themselves a certain way, and they do all this stuff. And but you're not gonna look like the world does. I think there is a different look about you, but your heart and your mind many times drive that countenance. And she was lovely. There is no question about that. She had an incredible beauty. In fact, Solomon had noticed her well. He was very much impressed with her. She was certainly different, radically different, it looks like. It seems like, but there was an appeal to that, as there is with Christian women. I think there's an appeal to a sweet heart and a beautiful temperament and a smile and a graciousness and a poise that comes with that. But she compares herself then not to anybody. She says, I'm like the tents of Kedar. I'm like the curtains of Solomon. She talks about what Solomon chose to adorn his palaces with, surrounding himself with this loveliness. She says, I'm dark like the tents, but I see these drapes and these beautiful things around me, and I understand the loveliness of them. She was superior, really superior to the painted and perfumed showiness of the ladies in the court through her own natural beauty. She must have been striking indeed, wouldn't she? She was quite the sight. She even defends that beauty, natural as it is, by describing her life. She talks about the life where there were needs and responsibilities that she was called to meet. I don't just sit around here like you guys do in this court and take care of myself. My time was not my own. I didn't have a lot of free time. I had a garden to tend to. My brothers gave me responsibilities. There was a need. Responsibilities had to be met. She needed to explain this to these ladies, it seems. She seems to want to tell why she shouldn't be there. She doesn't belong there. You should let me leave this situation. I shouldn't be here. And so she explains herself, many of whom had no way to possibly understand what her life was like, the simplicity of her life. And the world doesn't understand that about us. The simplicities that bring us joy, the simple things that bring us joy, the peace that provides us joy. you know, I love a life with no drama. Apparently people thrive on drama, but there are wonderful things about being a Christian that release us from the things that these women had no way to understand. They didn't understand who she was. They didn't understand her beauty. But due to her family situation, she says, it appears that this young woman had no father. Her brothers were certainly in charge. She talks about her brothers. Later, we'll hear from her brothers. She talks about her mother, but never a father. And the brothers are the ones who have overseen things. And so her brothers have made her keep the vineyards. It seems that they have a problem. They're angry. She says, my brothers were angry and they told me I needed, there's a lot of things written about the fact that she definitely had formed this relationship with this shepherd. And it could be that the brothers kept her busy because she would wander out to the fields and find the shepherd. I don't know if that was true or not. Or perhaps they just said, listen, you know, this is a hard life and we've got hard circumstances and we've got to do other things and we need you and you're going to have to step up. But whatever the reason, she tells us the story. And that, you know, she didn't have sunblock and sun gear and all this stuff to wear. You know, she didn't have a big straw hat with fancy sunglasses and sunblock like we do now. And not to mention, for her to do the job that she was asked to do very well, she would not be able to shield herself constantly from the sun. It was just a fact of life. She was in the sun. She worked hard. And so she says, my family had asked me to tend, I had a family situation to tend to. It didn't allow me to tend to my own needs. I mean, she says that. She says, in my own vineyard, I have not kept. I mean, I've not been able to dote on myself the way that you have. I've not able to do what you ladies on a daily basis do here. It was not an option for me to treat myself with beauty treatments. She didn't belong there. And she knew she didn't belong there. They didn't know she didn't belong there. They couldn't quite figure her out. And the king wanted her there. And so these women had a job to keep her happy and to keep her persuaded to be there. I don't know. I mean, this was some gal. She needed no artificial aids to enhance her beauty. She was gorgeous. The king had noticed it. She really had no need to explain herself, but this is what we do, isn't it? We explain ourselves. We explain ourselves because we want others to know about the circumstances that have put us in a particular place. Even when a king is smitten with us, we would explain ourselves. Our beauty is not measured by the world. There is a different beauty in us, a different beauty in her, one that the shepherd knew and appreciated. He understood who she was. And though the palace couldn't place it or understand it, it was apparent. So she turns again to what really matters, what is important, her beloved, her adorable, wonderful shepherd. And she says, tell me, oh, you whom I love, where you feed your flock, where you make it rest at noon. For why should I be the one who veils herself by the flocks of your companions? And then the women of the court say, if you don't know, O fairest among women, that phrase is used 3 times. It is all 3 places it is used by, I believe, the women of the harem. And we'll see it in 3 different instances in the song. Follow in the footsteps of the flock and feed your little goats beside the shepherd's tents. Okay, so more of this conversation she has with these women. And she begins to focus again on her beloved, on this young man who she longs to see again. Her thoughts go back to the former days, the days where she roamed at will in the green pastures, able to meet her shepherd, exchange with him all the niceties and the vows and the promises of love and the deepest emotions. By the way, later we will see, and I'll just go ahead and say that she demands these women not to become crass about their relationship, that her relationship is always appropriate. And she defends the fact that it has never been inappropriate, this relationship she's had with the shepherd, that it is a true love, that they have sought to marry one day. And that it was the hope of her heart would be that they would marry. But her thoughts go back to former days when she roamed the green pastures and she was able to meet him. Tell me, O thou, whom my soul loveth, where thou makest thy flock rest at noon. For why should I be the one turned aside by the flocks of your companions? Why should I be veiled between the flocks of your companion? There's an entitlement, an intimacy that she feels she should have with this shepherd, that she understands that she and she alone should have this intimate relationship with him. That why should I go roaming like one of your friends from flock to find you? I should be able to know exactly where you are. I shouldn't ever have to search for you. I should always know where you are. Speaking to these women of the court, that she felt they had no right to keep her there, that she should have free access and intimacy. Rightfully, I should know. And she longs for these open fields of freedom with him. She really wanted the freedom that marriage could afford, that the freedom that needed no veil. That's really what she's talking about here. That I have a right to go back and marry who I want to marry. That I shouldn't have to not know where he is. That I should have open access to him, appropriate open access. That this is the one I want to marry. Out of the palace and into the fields. That's what I should be allowed. And isn't that what we want? Immediate access to our shepherd. That we should be abiding in his field. She says, I should know where his field is. And not only should I know where his field is, but I should have access all the time in his field, away from the world, living in the pasture that he is in. And so that is what she's talking about here. In verse 8, it seems, let me see where my text is. If you do not know, O fairest among women, and this is the women of the court again, follow in the footsteps of the flock, lead your little goats beside the shepherd's tents. And so it seems at first glance that this may be the beloved speaking, but I think the language is sarcastic. It's the women of the court that use this term, O fairest among many, and there also seems to be some feminine pronouns here that is in the text, it seems. All right, and so it seems that what they're saying is, if you want to find a shepherd, act like a shepherd. Just act like a shepherd, or act like the sheep. Get forth in the footsteps of the flocks, the pasture of the kids, by the huts of the shepherds. It's full of sarcasm. It's not, I don't think, what the shepherd would say, but what these women, they cannot believe that she does not understand her present positions, the glories of the life in the palace. Don't you realize what King Solomon is offering you, they say? What an opportunity she's had. She's destined now to work. If she were to go back, she'd be destined to work in the fields forever for the rest of her life. And why would she choose this farm shepherd boy when she could have Solomon and be his favorite? Which, by the way, in the song, he will say, you are my favorite. You will be number one among all of the women. And so they say, in a sense, the world is yours. And you don't appreciate this. And if you really don't appreciate it, just go back to your fields and act like a sheep, act like a shepherd, and then you'll find him. I mean, you're a country bumpkin. Wander around the fields. That's all it takes to find a shepherd. What could she possibly have that these women would understand the value of? It's like Judas watching Mary pour oil over our Lord's feet and complaining about it. He didn't understand the love that Mary had for Jesus. It's the same sentiment. They think, why is the king wasting on this young woman who wants to find a shepherd in a field? And yet she's in the household of a king. And so it is this love that is being examined of this young woman that makes no sense. There's no logic to this type of love. The Shulamite was no fool, though. She had tasted the real freedom. She had lived in the true liberty with this shepherd. The women in Solomon's court only understood counterfeit freedom. They weren't free. Not for 1 minute were they free. They were not free of the commitment of the king and the ultimate bondage of his enslavement to him. And so it was just as Samuel had told the people, and we read about it in 1 Samuel, the 8th chapter, how if you want a king, they're going to take your sons, they're going to put them in battle, they're going to take your women, your daughters, and bring them in and be his wives. they're going to take he's going to take the fruit of your field to feed the household. And so that is not freedom. These women have no freedom. This young woman understood what true freedom was, and she sensed that they did not. All right. And so now we come into the king. I have compared you, my love, to my filly among Pharaoh's chariots. Your cheeks are lovely with ornaments, your neck with chains of gold. We will make you ornaments of gold with studs of silver. So now we finally hear from this king, and he appears to flatter her. And he praises her power and her person. And remember, this is the history of a king who has not obeyed God. So we're told in Deuteronomy 7:14 through 17 that the future kings are not to, that surely you'll set up a king for yourself. He shall not multiply horses for himself, nor cause people to return to Egypt to multiply horses. For the Lord has said to you, you shall not return that way again. Neither shall you multiply wives for yourself, lest his heart be turned away, nor shall he greatly multiply silver or gold for himself. Well, Solomon had lost these instructions, apparently. And not only has he obtained a lot of riches and he'll have a lot of wives, but he also talks here about Pharaoh's chariots and his fillies. And we know that he went to Egypt and got horses, and he did multiply wives. And he compares this young woman to the fillies among Pharaoh's chariots, the most noble and wonderful species of horses. He was fascinated with Egypt, and he made a queen of an Egyptian. We know that. And so now he's going to compare her with these horses. I know that doesn't sound like a compliment to us, but it seemed to be in that day. So this king was so dazzled with these horses of Pharaoh that perhaps the most beautiful and lovely young women compared only to them. He was equally impressed with this Shulamite as he was with the horses and the fillies. In her personality, her glorious person, he compares her with this most magnificent force that he had ever known. In her chastity and purity, she gave even a king a reason to pause. She was quite magnificent. He goes on and talks about not really changing the subject probably, but he talks about her adornments. He addresses her beauty in detail later, but here he talks about her adornments. He appears to be focused on the beauty of the trinkets that, by the way, he surely has set upon her. She didn't come in with them. And so he's quite impressed with the things that he's set upon this young woman, just as you would with a horse and battle array. She was pretty when she arrived, but now that he's dressed her, she is really something, and he's made her even better. It's like the promises of the world. I mean, if you already don't look good, just let the world promise you, what's powerful and what's beautiful and what's wonderful and what to aim for. The headdress would have possibly been adorned with dangling beads, small ornaments. You see these all over India at formal functions. Coins or something that would jingle. They make noise. I don't know when you go to India, the women all wear the bracelets that ching, 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 you can hear them come. It's like a cat, you can't sneak up on anybody. But anyway, so, but they would have jingled, and Solomon, it seems, has tried to embellish her natural beauty with all of this. And thereby she would be indebted, and she would be grateful, and she would look in the mirror, and she would think that she too was, would be very impressed with these rows of beads. And then in verse 11, he promises, we will make the borders of gold with studs of silver. I think this is a crown he's offering her, that he's offering her the crown, that she will be a wife, not just a concubine, that she will take a prominent position. He offers to make her his wife, to allow her the comforts of his life, of this palace for the rest of her days. She could live in ease. She could be taken care of. And so this is what is being offered here. And of course, we're going to see that she's not impressed, and he has nothing to offer her that she's interested in, which will fascinate him. I actually think he really did write a song about something that he never really understood. My guess is she could have been the only woman ever that said, I don't want to live in your palace. I don't want to be 1001. I'm not going to do it. I don't want to do it. You think about it. I mean, the other 300 and 700 didn't say no. And so this woman, this young woman, was a fascination to him. And when we refuse the glories of the world to serve and to work and to be humble and to be meek, it is a fascination to the world that is not easily understood. And I think that's who she was. And now he offers it the queen, the greatest king of that day. And this young woman is so devoted to this shepherd boy from the hill country and this farm country that he could not turn her head. And I will tell you that this is not like this experience that we have on a daily basis, like I said. And the world offers you happiness and wealth and beauty. And if we are not devoted to something bigger, our heads will turn and we will take the offer and we will decide to live in the palace, to wear the dangly ornaments. I will tell you, people do it all the time. Unless we love something else better, these offers come and we take them, and then we take another and we take another and we take another. Because we have no greater love, we accept the offers. And these were some pretty heady offers, man. You think about it. I mean, this is no junk stuff. This is big, you know. I tell you that most young women, is that bad what I said? Okay. I thought maybe it was not very nice, because sometimes I say things and Randy said, Mom, you know what that means? And I say, no, I don't know what that means. All right. Sorry. Okay. Good. Okay. But, you know, I'll tell you, most young women, given the opportunity this young woman had, would have taken it. Yeah. And we must give ourselves the opportunity to explore our loves as we examine this book. What is it that we love? What opportunities do we take? And what opportunities drive us? And the only way that we are able to forego all that the world has to offer us is that we know our beloved and we understand the value that he has in our lives well enough. And it would have been impossible for her had she not already experienced the great benefits of the abilities and the charm and the stability of this shepherd. But she knew him. Her predicament is much like Satan. I mean, Christ, when Satan came and tempted him and offers him the world. And Christ said, I'm going to keep my love for God, my Father. So, I have at the bottom of my page, we remember we sing, you are my all in all. The lily of the valley. I found a friend in Jesus. We'll talk more and more about these as we go. I have compared you, my love, to the Phillies. Hang on, let me get back to my text here. All right. And I will okay, I think I went backwards. I'm sorry. Okay. While the king is at his table, this is her speaking again. My spikenard sends forth its fragrance. A bundle of myrrh is my beloved to me that lies all night between my breasts. My beloved is to me a cluster of henna blooms in the vineyards of En-Gedi. All right. And so the song now resumes with the Shulamite speaking. It's difficult, as we've mentioned, to determine these speaking parts. It took me a long time. I've read a lot of stuff. It could be that it's different, but I think this is definitely, from what I read, and I don't know Hebrew, but this seems to be a female speaking. The previous comments were males, was a male. Usually the clue apparently is found in the gender of the pronouns used. The king is now retired. He has a pause from his pursuit to her and this attention to this young lady. And she notes that after he makes his grand entrance or after we're told of the words that he has now said to her, that he's gone off and he's sitting at his banquet table and she sees him there. She sees him in all of his glory. He's at his table, I'm sure spread with fine banquet. And she talks later about the banquet and the pressure that he's put on her, has been identified. And then her mind turns back to the love, the love that she has for the shepherd. So she's had the pressure from the king, the pressure from the women in the harem, and though her body is there, while the king's at his table, her mind's far away. And it's absolutely what we encounter and endeavor when we endeavor to keep our minds clean as the world bombards us with all the physical temptations and all the trash coming in all the time. It's what keeps prisoners of war sane. We've talked about that, but prisoners of war, they'll tell you that they had to keep their minds able to occupy thoughts that would make them free from their present circumstances so that they didn't go really crazy, but that they would. But there's no question that to conquer the body is one thing, but to conquer the mind is another. So our minds are our own. I tell you what, it's 8 o'clock, so I'm going to stop here, and we'll come back to this right here. We'll start in verse 12 next week. The king is at his table, and so I hope everybody enjoyed this tonight. Let me turn off the recorder, and I'll see if there's any questions. Where's my mouse here?